Most women are taught to be pleasing, to soften their edges, to silence their anger, to twist themselves into a shape that keeps him comfortable. And so she becomes palatable, sweet, available, undemanding. But something inside her dies a little every time she smiles when she wants to scream, every time she waits for a message that never comes, every time she shrinks to fit a space that was never made for her. And then one day, she stops. She doesn't announce it. She doesn't slam the door. She simply stops. It is not revenge. It is not cruelty. It is individuation, the awakening of the self beyond the persona, beyond the roles she's been handed, beyond the girl who begged to be chosen. You see, when a woman turns inward and begins the journey into her shadow, she doesn't become darker, she becomes whole. She excavates the rage that was buried beneath politeness. She finds the grief trapped under the smile. She meets the version of herself she was never allowed to be. And when she re-emerges, she is no longer seeking a mirror. She is no longer desperate to be reflected in a man's approval. She has become the mirror. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But becoming that woman costs everything you were told you had to be. And when she finally becomes that kind of woman, the woman who no longer performs softness to avoid abandonment, he feels the shift like a phantom limb. He may not understand it, but he feels it. The cord is cut. The dynamic is broken. The game is no longer interesting to her because she has stopped needing to win it. A woman like this no longer orbits around him. She doesn't wait for crumbs of affection. She doesn't agonize over his silence. She sees it all with brutal clarity. The projection, the egoic need for control, the fear of intimacy masked as aloofness. She names it, not out loud, but inside herself. And in naming it, she breaks the spell. Because here's the truth. A man can only play with your self-worth when you haven't claimed it. He can only be indifferent when your love is still in negotiation. But when you become the woman who has nothing to prove, he loses his power. He regrets. Not because you were perfect, not because you did everything right, but because you became someone he cannot reach with the same old tactics. You evolved past the version of him that never evolved himself. This is the part he never saw coming, that the same woman who once waited by the phone, who once ached for him to see her, would become the woman who no longer waits, no longer aches, and no longer needs to be seen, because she sees herself, fully, fiercely, finally. He will miss her in moments he can't explain, in conversations with women who don't challenge him, in silent hours when no validation arrives to soothe his ego, in mirrors that reflect nothing but his own unfinished work. Because she became the mirror he was too afraid to face. And here is where it gets archetypal. She is no longer the maiden, she is the queen, not the fairy tale version, passive and adored, the sovereign version, the one who rules herself. The one who has walked through the fire of heartbreak and emerged with the bones of her own truth in her hands. She has danced with her shadow. She has met the parts of herself that once scared her into submission. And now she walks with them, shoulder to shoulder. Her anger no longer consumes her. It guides her. Her sadness no longer drowns her. It cleanses her. Her silence is no longer fearful. It is intentional. This woman is a storm in velvet. She doesn't scream to be heard. She whispers, and the world leans in. And he realizes too late that while he was busy trying to keep the upper hand, she was building a world where he no longer held any power. She was outgrowing the version of herself that needed him to come back. She was becoming a woman who would never beg for breadcrumbs again. This is what he regrets. Not the moments of laughter, not the nights tangled in sheets, not even the connection they once had. What he regrets, what burns in the silence, is that she became something he cannot possess. Not because she is bitter, but because she is free. She no longer flinches at the thought of being alone. Solitude, once feared like an echo chamber of rejection, has become her sanctuary. She has learned that presence, her own sacred presence, is far more nourishing than proximity to someone who never really saw her. This is the paradox of the feminine in her power. She is magnetic not because she chases, but because she no longer needs to. The more she releases the grasping, the tighter life seems to wrap its arms around her. She doesn't lure with desperation. She attracts with alignment, and alignment cannot be faked. It is felt. He sees it, though he doesn't have the language to name it. He only knows that something about her feels unreachable now. As if she stepped beyond the veil into a reality he has no key for. He used to be the sun she orbited around. Now she is the center of her own galaxy. He is a distant planet, fading into her past light years behind her gaze. But what changed? Was it the books she read? The friends who reminded her of her worth? The nights she cried on the floor whispering prayers she wasn't sure anyone would hear? It was all of it, and none of it. What changed was this. She stopped waiting for a savior. She stopped believing that love had to hurt to be real. She stopped confusing chaos with passion, withholding with mystery, silence with strength. She stopped internalizing his inability to love as a flaw in her own worth. And she did the most revolutionary thing a woman can do. She chose herself. Not in a shallow performative way, not in a watch me glow up to make him regret it kind of way. No. She chose herself quietly, thoroughly, in the marrow of her being. She chose herself when no one was watching, when the nights were still long, when her heart still ached, when she had every reason to go back. But didn't. That kind of choice changes the landscape of a woman's soul. It rewires her nervous system. It purifies her boundaries. It makes her discernment razor sharp and her tolerance for emotional breadcrumbs vanish into dust. He regrets it because he sees that she no longer responds to the things that used to work. His half-efforts, his breadcrumb texts, his occasional compliments wrapped in ego. None of it lands. It used to shake her world. Now it barely stirs her breath. That's what haunts him. Not that she left, but that she healed. That she alchemized the pain he gave her into power. That his silence no longer echoes in her chest. That his name no longer tastes like longing. Because she has become the kind of woman who doesn't seek closure from another person. She is the closure. She wrote the ending, not with rage, but with radical clarity. And when you become your own closure, you become unshakable. Jung knew this. He knew that the human psyche craves wholeness, that every unintegrated wound will seek a mirror, that most relationships are projections playing dress-up as love. She saw this, eventually, that what she loved in him was the unclaimed parts of herself, the confidence, the detachment, the sense of mystery. And once she reclaimed those within, he no longer held the same grip on her psyche. She reclaimed the animus he once embodied. She married her inner masculine. And in doing so, she no longer needed his. He may still text. He may still hover. He may still try to remind her of the memories, the sparks, the unfinished sentences. But she has evolved beyond nostalgia. She lives in the now. And in the now, he is a memory she blesses, not a future she prays for. This is the moment of deepest regret for him. Not when she left, but when she stopped needing anything from him at all. No reaction, no explanation, no last word. That kind of woman isn't waiting at the finish line. She is the finish line, and not every man is meant to cross it. She has become a woman who evokes transformation, not validation. A woman who will not abandon herself to be understood. A woman who dares to be misunderstood rather than contort her truth. A woman who walks away not in anger, but in sovereignty. And when he looks into the eyes of other women, women still afraid to be too much, too loud, too demanding, he remembers her. Not for how she loved him, but for how she outgrew him. There's a particular kind of silence that follows the departure of a woman who has integrated her shadow. It is not the silence of resentment. It is not the silence of waiting. It is the silence of peace, so deep, so vast, that it humbles the one who once mistook her love for weakness. He regrets her absence not because he suddenly discovered his feelings, but because her absence confronted him with his own. Without her to mirror his worth, to inflate his hollow confidence with her longing, he is left to sit in the vacancy of what he never built within himself. That silence becomes unbearable. But she is no longer listening, because the woman who has faced the darkest corners of herself is no longer impressed by shallow light. She's not drawn to noise. She's drawn to resonance, and resonance cannot be faked. It is the frequency of truth, and truth is all she breathes now. He will try to remember her laugh, but it won't sound the same in his memory anymore. It will carry the ache of everything he never held with reverence. He will try to recall the warmth in her eyes, only to find them replaced by something colder, clarity. Not cruel, not vengeful, just clear, unapologetically clear. Because when a woman has done the inner work, her gaze changes. She no longer looks for safety in others, she embodies it. Her presence becomes a force field, her time sacred, her affection earned. Not because she is hard, but because she is finally whole. There's a sacred violence in healing. It dismantles illusions. It cuts ties that were never real to begin with. It exposes false selves. And when she did this work, she didn't just lose him. She lost the need for him. And that, more than anything, is what he cannot forgive. Because now he sees her not as the girl who cried for him, but as the woman who walked away from him without a backward glance. And that image is carved into the architecture of his ego. No praise, no apology, just a silence that says, "You are no longer my home." This kind of woman doesn't inspire pity. She inspires awe. Her strength is not performative, it's cellular, and it speaks even in her absence, especially in her absence. He starts to realize that he was never her center, only her distraction from becoming her own. It's not that she doesn't feel, she feels everything, but she no longer leaks her energy into places where it is not reciprocated. She no longer tries to convince someone to see her value. Her energy has become precious. She spends it wisely, as if her soul is a currency not everyone can afford. And here's what he didn't understand until it was too late. You cannot keep a woman who has learned to feed herself. You cannot manipulate a woman who has befriended her shadow. You cannot own a woman who belongs to herself. The moment she met herself fully was the moment she became untouchable. He will scroll through her photos, hoping to find a trace of the woman he used to know. But the woman in those images is no longer available. She is not pretending. She is not performing. She is present, with herself, first and always. She is the archetypal wild feminine, untamed, rooted, deeply sovereign, the kind of woman who does not trade her intuition for intimacy, who will not dim her light to make another feel more secure, who does not wait to be chosen. Because she has already chosen herself, and when he finally realizes what he lost, it won't be because she told him. It will be because no one else makes him feel the way she did. Not in her affection, but in her depth, in her reflection, in her presence, in her ability to see right through him without needing to fix him. She didn't want to save him. She wanted to grow beside him. And when she saw that he was not willing to grow, she outgrew him. Quietly. Completely. This is the tragedy he must live with. That she would have loved him with galaxies if he had dared to meet her there. But he chose to remain small. And she chose to expand. And expansion, once begun, cannot be reversed. It stretches the soul beyond its previous dimensions, tears old wounds open only to let the light in, cracks the shell of dependency so that sovereignty can finally breathe. The woman he lost has not just moved on, she has evolved. And what he mourns now is not just the loss of her presence, but the recognition that he can no longer meet her in the place she now inhabits. He may try to return, with old language, old charm, old patterns dressed in new promises. But something inside her, something ancient and unwavering, will already know. Her intuition will feel the dissonance, like a note out of tune in a symphony of self-respect. Her body will remember the cost of shrinking. And this time, she will not pay it, because she has become the woman who honors her boundaries like sacred scripture, who walks away not in bitterness, but in holy stillness, who looks in the mirror and sees a woman built from ashes and insight, fire and forgiveness. She has seen the ruins of her old self, and she does not wish to rebuild there. He might wonder why he feels so haunted, why her silence rings louder than her presence ever did. It is because she no longer needs to prove anything. She no longer needs to explain. Her healing is her closure. Her absence is her message. And now everything that once felt secure to him begins to tremble. He was comfortable when she was uncertain. He was powerful when she was doubting. But now she moves with the quiet confidence of a woman who knows exactly who she is, even when no one else does. That is what unravels him. Because most men are not afraid of being unloved. They are afraid of being forgotten. And she has not just forgotten him, she has transcended him. This is the woman who no longer romanticizes potential, who no longer believes in fixing broken men in the hope they will rise. She no longer gets high on hope. She is high on truth now. And truth does not beg, it does not plead, it simply is. Jung spoke of the animus and the anima, the masculine and feminine principles within us all. She has awakened hers. Her inner masculine is no longer passive, no longer waiting for a man to show up and give her direction. Her animus has matured into discernment, structure, purpose. She has balance now. She has become the union of opposites within herself. And this inner alchemy has made her deeply, profoundly attractive. Not in a way that invites pursuit, but in a way that commands reverence. You don't chase a woman like this. You rise to meet her, or you lose her. He didn't rise. He lingered. He assumed he took, and now he regrets. Because no matter how many women he meets, they all feel like shadows of her. Lighter, perhaps. Easier. But lacking the depth that once held up a mirror to his soul. And it is depth he now craves, even though he once fled from it. That is the cruel irony of the awakened feminine. The more she integrates, the more she reveals a man's lack of integration. The more she becomes whole, the more he feels his fragmentation. And if he has not done the work, he will interpret her power as punishment, her self-respect as rejection, her silence as cruelty. But it is not cruelty, it is clarity. She simply no longer negotiates her worth. This is the death of the old dynamic, the codependent dance, the push and pull, the longing that once laced her every word. That woman is gone, and in her place stands one who no longer fears being misunderstood. She only fears betraying herself. She would rather be alone in truth than entangled in illusion. Rather be whole in solitude than half-loved in connection. Rather walk through the valley of shadows than remain in the arms of someone who cannot meet her there. So when he lays awake at night, scrolling through a past he never truly valued, he isn't just missing her. He's missing who he was when she believed in him. He's missing the reflection of potential she once held up to his face. He's missing the love he never learned how to receive. But she has reclaimed it. Every drop, every ounce, every sacred fragment. She has poured it back into herself. Now that love belongs to her. No longer scattered, no longer spent on empty echoes or unworthy hands. It is hers now, fortified, distilled, and reborn into a kind of love that doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't cling. A love that stands tall within her ribcage, humming with the quiet knowing, I am enough. He regrets it most when he sees her radiant in her solitude, no longer orbiting anyone but her own truth. When he sees her walk into a room, not to be seen, but because she sees herself, the moment, the energy. She has become presence incarnate. She doesn't have to announce her worth. It drips from her posture, from her silence, from the fire behind her eyes that no longer flickers for the sake of another's comfort. And the more she chooses herself, the less accessible she becomes to those who haven't done the same. Not because she is arrogant, but because her spirit no longer tolerates dilution. Shallow conversation repels her. Emotional games bore her. She is no longer stimulated by attention, only by depth. This woman, the woman he once took for granted, has become the embodiment of the sacred feminine. Intuitive, powerful, untethered. She is the high priestess of her own life. She listens to the voice within that once whispered but now roars. She no longer silences her instincts to preserve connection. She follows them, to protect her peace, to protect her becoming. And he sees it. He sees how the world begins to respond to her differently. How the same woman he dismissed now commands respect without asking. How others lean in when she speaks. Not because she is loud, but because her words carry weight. They carry truth. The kind of truth that can't be faked. The kind born from nights she didn't think she would survive. He will try to replicate her in other women, searching for the same fire, the same intelligence, the same emotional intensity. But what he finds are reflections, not the source. And reflections, no matter how bright, cannot replace the original flame. Because she is not just a woman anymore, she is an archetype, a force, a threshold that once crossed changes everything. To be loved by a woman like this and to lose her is to confront your own inadequacy. And the tragedy is, she would have stayed, not for promises but for growth. She never asked for perfection, only presence, only effort, only honesty, and he offered none. So now his regret becomes a ghost. It follows him in quiet moments, in the pause before sleep, in the hollow spaces where her voice used to live. Regret becomes his teacher. But the lesson came too late. Because a woman like her doesn't circle back. She doesn't reopen doors she had to burn down just to free herself. She doesn't revisit graves. She builds gardens on top of them. Flowers grow where her pain once lived, and she guards them now, fiercely. She has learned the cost of giving too much, of mistaking wounds for soulmates, of confusing chaos for passion. And now, she is deliberate in her choices, in her love, in her life. And this deliberateness terrifies those who still want her to bend, who still want her to soften in the face of their uncertainty, but she will not. Because when a woman reclaims her soul, she becomes immovable. And yet she is not hard, she is not bitter, she is not closed, she is precise. Her love is precise, her attention is precise, her standards are precise. And that precision is the blade that severs her from every version of herself that once begged to be seen. So when he remembers her now, he remembers not just what she gave him, but what he never earned. Her time, her faith, her forgiveness, her loyalty. He remembers the softness he once mistook for weakness, now knowing it was grace. He remembers the way she held space for his growth, while he gave her nothing but excuses. But the woman he remembers is no longer here. In her place is someone stronger, someone wiser, someone quieter, yet infinitely more powerful. And the only thing left for him now is to watch her rise. And rise she does, not like a firework, quick to vanish, but like the slow, undeniable dawn. Steady, certain, unapologetic. The world doesn't always notice a woman like this right away, but eventually it must adjust to her light, because she no longer dims it. She moves now with the grace of someone who has nothing to prove. She walks into her days not seeking attention, but embodying intention. Everything she touches is deliberate. Every word she speaks is rooted in truth. Every connection she allows is a reflection of how deeply she now honors herself. He sees this from a distance, the quiet revolution of her becoming. And though he may never admit it, he knows he did not lose her to another man. He lost her to herself. Because the greatest love story is not the one that ends in another's arms, but the one that begins when a woman finally falls in love with her own soul. This love is not loud. It does not seek validation. It is not dressed in revenge or disguise. It is soft, like moonlight, fierce, like the tide. It heals not by erasing the past, but by integrating it, carrying its lessons like sacred runes etched into her bones. She no longer carries the weight of being understood. She no longer reaches into her chest to hand someone else her worth. She no longer performs palatability to earn affection. That era is gone, buried. Now, her love is a sanctuary, not a battlefield. Her presence is a gift, not a transaction. Her silence is a boundary, not a punishment. And he must come to terms with the fact that his chapter in her story is closed, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Because the woman she is now cannot fit inside the version of love he once offered. She is not cold, she's clear. She is not unkind, she's unwavering. She is not cruel, she is complete. And in this completeness, there is no space for half-love, for borrowed identity, for emotional inconsistency masked as mystery. She wants real, she wants raw, she wants resonance. And if that cannot be given, she walks away. Without anger, without drama, without hesitation. Because the woman who knows her worth doesn't need closure. She is the closure. And if you've ever loved a woman like this, if you ever had the chance to touch the hem of her becoming and you let it slip, then you will spend the rest of your life chasing echoes. She will not return. She will not explain. She will not unravel herself again just to make you comfortable. Because she has tasted freedom. And freedom is not something you trade, not even for love, especially not for love that asks you to forget who you are. This is the kind of woman men regret losing for the rest of their lives, not because she punished them, but because she outgrew the need to be chosen. She chose herself. She rose from her own ashes, and she became a force no man can possess, only respect. Because the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.